Hi there everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. Now today we're going to be covering a new deck profile for Final Fantasy TCG, and it's been a little while since I've done a deck video, to be honest. But one thing I did want to quickly mention before we go into the deck is I've actually been rejigging a lot of the stuff to do with my Patreon page. So as you'll see at the end of this video, I've expanded greatly upon the credits that I've kind of given to my high-level patrons, and I'm so thankful for every single one of them. So what I wanted to do is get them to choose their favourite card and have it represent them as their avatar for these videos, and some of them give a short message as well. So if you're interested in anything like that or want to support the channel, then definitely check out the Patreon link in the description box below. I'm also very pleased to say that I hit 500 followers on Twitch this week, so definitely check out the link in the description box below if you want to check out any streams I'm doing. I'm planning on doing a big old marathon of Kingdom Hearts 3 when it's released on Tuesday, so definitely check into that. And there's obviously Discord and Twitter and all that other good stuff that I'll leave in the description box below. But instead of me rambling on about promoting my channel, let's go straight into the deck. Now, as you can see, a lot of the shell is very, very standard to Wind Earth decks. So going over forwards, obviously we have things like Dadaluma, Wall, Y'shtola, Barbarisha, Camelot, all that good stuff that goes in any Earth Wind deck. But what I wanted to do is go with a deck that's a little bit of a twist on it, because while we're still in the middle of Opus VII and we are waiting on Opus VIII, why not think outside the box and go a little bit different? So the card that I've been really desperately wanting to play since Opus 3, and you guys, if you go back and check one of my old videos, you'll know how much I like this card, is Krile. Now, I think that having cards like Leo and Chaos, etc. allows us to play new versions of Krile decks in a way that works really, really well. And I wanted to go big or go home with some massive explosive plays, but not deviate too heavily from the standard Wind Earth shell, so that you still get the consistency that's available. So we have 4 copies of Krile in this deck, 3 of the Opus 3 one, which is the primary use for it, and 1 copy of the Opus 7 one, which is, funnily enough, the only Opus 7 card that's actually in this deck, so we could have probably built this deck ages ago. But I do think that having the 4th Krile makes the consistency of being able to use her, or the S abilities on her, much more frequently. And then obviously the summon that we tend to use with her is Phoenix. Now Phoenix is obviously a fire card in an Earth Wind deck, which is weird. But we've seen a lot of Urianger mill decks that came around over the past sort of 2 sets, and they're multicolored decks as well, and they've worked beautifully. They tend to use 7 CP Phoenix, whereas in this one we've gone with 4 CP. And the reason for that is so that not only can we pull out Krile, but we have access to Leo as well, who can be a real blockade late game if you allow him to, by building up things like your Cactuars or your forwards and backups, because he can actually be really... He's a card that I've never really attached myself to until looking at the Nyan decks, or the Hiko Nyan decks, which are Earth Water that use Leo and things like Ramza as their way of kind of branching into multicolor by using Ramza, or by using Leo and things like Chaos as well. We have gone with a single copy of Urianger in this deck because the ability to pull back Liak or Cactuar with a Phoenix is really, really handy. And the fact that you can just pull back Liak at all times, because at the end of the day your opponent is going to attack you at some point. So if you've already had Liak out, it's going to trigger. So you only actually need 1 of it, because you can just keep pulling it back over and over again with Urianger, Phoenix, and then you can keep pulling back the Phoenixes with Ejido Marijido and things like that. The Final Fantasy XI engine is in full force here, so we have access to Semilafina, Star Sybil, Shantotto, Moogle 11, and Camelot, which will obviously then search for a Dark Forward. Now the Dark Forward that I've chosen in this particular deck is actually the Emperor and not Goldes. Now Goldes is a perfectly valid shout for this deck, but the reason I've gone with the Emperor is because it's a hard counter to Y'shtola, which means that they can't then Y'shtola anything that I'm doing, but I can still do it to them. I actually think that there's a lot of things. It also counts as Porum as well, which means that they're even more likely, or even less likely to be able to counter your Y'shtola if you have an Emperor on the board. If you're looking for something with a bit more power, you can obviously change the Emperor into Goldes or any other Dark Forward realistically, Shadow Lord even, but I wanted to have something in here that had staying power or allowed, or was something I could play down like in Y'shtola that's like, no, you can't do this, I'm going to go off and I'm going to do my thing, because then it means that you can use your Kryles at maximum potential and your opponent not be able to do an awful lot about it. I did even think about using Goldes in here because it means that alongside Leo, you have reason to use the Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Searcher in Epitaph, but honestly, the backup space in here I found really, really difficult because Earth has so many high CP costing backups, and I didn't want to deviate from you know, being able to run the full Final Fantasy XI package. I didn't really want to deviate from using 3 minors because being able to pick up Kryles is really important. And honestly, there's actually not that many cards in here that need like Leo to be out. So as much as Urianger and Phoenix, or Phoenix is a big part of the deck, you have Chaos to be able to get it. You have Shantotto in a pinch to be able to get it. Speaking of which, I'm only running 1 Shantotto in here and not 2. And the reason for that is because we're running Krile, and Krile is a one-sided board wipe. Yes, she requires a bit more setup than Shantotto would, but it's something that you can just pull in, like your opponent can just have their board wiped at any time, and that I think warrants us only using 1 Shantotto, even though the colour fixing is nice. Feel free to change up the backup lineup here, because there are 18 in here, which is quite a high number of backups in general, but honestly this was the, having tested it with a few different people, this was the best I could find for this deck. Cecil is in here primarily as just a large body, as well as being an EX burst, and honestly the reason for that is because I've tried a couple of more techie plays in here, like Zidane, but honestly I didn't feel that Zidane was worth running in here without Chaos Walker of the Wheel, and even if I took out Hecatoncheir for Chaos Walker of the Wheel to increase my EX burst count and to have just straight removal, I just felt that we needed a bit more power in here. Yes, you have access to Leo late game, who can get very, very big, but you need to have other things on the board in order to do that. And yes, we have Wall being able to boost up things like Dadaluma, but honestly, there needs to be things in here that are above 7k for Wall to boost so that you can be a bit of a wall breaker and you're not relying on Kryle's S abilities to be able to remove, or Kryle's Lightning S ability to be able to remove things that you don't want to have to deal with. So I decided that Cecil was really good in here. Hecatoncheir you could take out for Chaos if you wanted to increase the wind or the wind count, because there's less wind than earth in the backups and forwards, or if you wanted to just increase your EX burst count in general. But I quite like having, I think 2 Diablos is a must, it's just too good not to play. But Hecaton is a very, very strong card because the damage it deals is combat related, which means your Stola can still die to it, and I just thought it was worthwhile alongside things like Wall, and Dadaluma for that matter. Decks that I found that this deck works quite well against include any decks that sort of swarm the board with a lot of smaller forwards, so things like Mono Fire or Mono Water or Wind Water to a lesser extent, because if your opponent is playing things like Layla and Viking and then they go in for their big Cloud of Darkness play and you respond with a Phoenix to pull back either a Krile that's going to wipe their entire board out, or even a Urianger that's going to take out, 2k will kill a Viking and then you can pull back a Cactuar and then take out the Layla with it, as long as they're not power boosted obviously. But there's a lot of like intricate plays like that that you can do to really limit your opponent's board so that they don't outswarm you, and I found that that's worked really, really well, and then you can kind of finish the job off with things like Wall, Dadaluma and Cecil. The power of Dadaluma and Cactuar is not to be understated. It's still extremely good, and it does very, very well in tournaments for a very good reason, so that's why we've, it's still in this deck, it's still crazy, and we're using the Krile as more of a supporting member rather than the entire point of the deck. However, decks like Mono Wind that tend to like swarm the board with much bigger forwards in the mid to late game, because this deck also needs to set up a little bit, it does have a little bit of a struggle against that. But it's definitely a really good fun deck, and one of the reasons that I've put in Emperor in this deck is because he shuts down Yuri. Now Yuri is an extremely powerful forward, as we all know, and I wanted to have something that countered it. So Emperor in this deck, as I stated earlier, is more of a counter pick than it is a straight up better card than say Goldae's or any other dark forward. However, you probably find that Emperor will probably do a lot of work against Mono Wind because they can't use their archers, they can't use their Alhanalem, they can't use their Yuri. There's a lot of things that you can do to Mono Wind by using Emperor. So that's going to be it for this deck profile. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, and as I said, don't forget to check out all of my social links in the description box below, and I shall be announcing the winner of the Noctis playmat in this week's card of the week, so be sure to look out for that in the very near future. And that's going to be it from me, so thanks again, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!